webinar, Catalyzing Impact, Investing in Innovative Low Carbon and Climate Resilient Development. The webinar will start in 3 minutes. For those of you who do not know us, AVPN is a network of funders and resource providers with over 600 members across 32 markets. Our mandate is to move more capital towards impact in Asia by providing social investors like yourselves opportunities to connect, learn, and lead. AVPN is an industry platform to connect and share best practices, experiences, and knowledge within the network for development of an impactful social investment community. As a part of AVPN's members sharing their work and experience in mobilizing capital for impact, this session will include information about AVPN's members, investee organization, funds, and products. Information shared by the speakers in this session is provided by third parties and does not represent the views of AVPN on any matter. AVPN does not warrant the accuracy, completeness, or usefulness of this information and is not liable or responsible for any reliance anyone may place on such information. Participants should consume this information at their own risk. AVPN reserves the right to edit, cut down, and adapt the content and materials to align with the stated agenda or purpose of this session. Any information or materials provided are only for information and knowledge sharing and does not constitute tax, legal, financial, or investment advice, nor do they constitute offers, solicitations, or recommendations for any investment activity. Before we kick off our main session, I'd like to highlight a few features of this room. Please note that this session will be recorded and you will be able to access the recording on the AVPN website. We will have time for Q&A, so do stay with us till the end of the session. Feel free to type up your questions in the Q&A box and we will convey these questions to our speakers. You can also upvote a question posted by others if you like a particular question to be answered. Upvoted questions have a higher likelihood of being picked up by the speakers. Due to time constraints, we're not going to be able to respond to all your questions. Rest assured that we are monitoring this behind the scenes and we'll try and address as many as possible. Before we start the session, we would like to get to know you better. Please take a minute to fill out the polls. Hello, everyone. A warm welcome to this webinar on Catalyzing Impact, Investing in Innovative Low Carbon and Climate Resilient Development. I'm Komal Sahu, Chief of Sustainable Finance at AVPN. It's great to have you all with us today. It looks like we have a fair few audience members already. We have 80 people already signed in, and we have people from family offices, we have people from DFIs, banks and so on, also interested in the content of today's webinar. Today's webinar is the second edition of Impact Fund webinar series. It's an offering for the AVPN family office community. Our next one is scheduled on the 8th of September and will feature funds focusing on investing in technology to create impact. The registration link is now being posted in the chat function if you wish to sign up. This webinar is also brought to you by our Climate Action Platform. The overall goal of the Climate Action Platform is to unlock capital in a more targeted and effective manner into climate solutions. Prachi Seth heads up our Climate Action Platform, and the link to the platform and her email is in the chat below. To kick off our discussion, I have the honor to introduce and welcome our webinar sponsor, AWR Lloyd's Aris Stamoulis. Aris is the Managing Director of Corporate Finance at AWR Lloyd. He's also the director of AWR Lloyd's asset management practice and has over 20 years of experience in financial markets in London, Johannesburg, Singapore, and Hong Kong. Welcome, Aris.
Thank you, Kamal. Hi, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining our presentation this morning, where we will be presenting two interesting impact investment funds. My name is Aris Stamoulis and I'm a Managing Director at AWR Lloyd based here in Melbourne, Australia. AWR Lloyd is a boutique advisory firm with a 20-year track record delivering strategic advice, M&A support, and industry intelligence. Additionally, we've also recently launched AWR Lloyd Asset Management, and we're looking to focus on disruptive megatrends. During these 20 years, AWR Lloyd has completed over 400 assignments for global clients looking to invest in Asia, as well as supporting our Asian clients with their growth strategies and access to capital markets. So first up today, we have Carl Anderson and Peter Fusaro, representing the excellent team from AV Group. They have a very strong relationship in both public and private sectors in Nordic countries, as well as multi-decade track record in investing. And this team has come together and are in the process of launching a Nordic-based impact fund. AWR Lloyd has partnered with AV Group to assist with their fundraising. Following on from Carl and Peter's presentation will be Brad Denning, who is an MD at AWR Lloyd in Bangkok. Brad heads up our Innovation for Sustainability group and will be discussing the SDG Plus Fund. The SDG Plus Fund is one of the various theme funds from our asset management stable, and that also includes the Natural Capital Fund targeting carbon offsets, a Clean Tech Metals Fund, given the rapid move to renewable energy and e-mobility, and a Greater Mekong Fund focusing on the rapid growth of the Mekong region. So without further delay, I'll pass it on to Carl and Peter to present AV Group and their Nordic ESG and Impact Fund. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much, Aris, and thank you, Kamal, and the AVPN network for putting this all together, and thank you, AWR Lloyd, for being a sponsor. As mentioned, my name is Carl Anderson. I'm the CEO and founder of AVG, and I'm joined tonight by my colleague, Peter Fusaro. We're coming to you live from New York City, capital of the financial world. It's a little disrupted here from COVID-19, but we're moving on and remain highly optimistic about the world and investments in green and clean power. So we will take it away. Our fund is based on Nordic ESG and impact. And I know ESG and impact is it's a large sort of area. One moment. It's a, let's take it, my computer pitches up. It's a big area, ESG and impact. What we focus on specifically are climate solutions, which are comprised of both investments in companies, growth companies, and climate infrastructure. We do so in conjunction with the Norwegian government. Norwegian government is a co-investor of ours. And so we then scale those companies both out into both the United States, where we are, and then into places like Southeast Asia. And I can talk about some of the examples of having done so before. But we're looking to raise, initially launched with about 200 million. The fund's capacity is about 1 billion. And so, I'll let Peter talk a little bit about the SDGs and the ESG.
Hello, it's Peter Fusaro. Excuse me. The fund is totally focused on ESG and impact, as is Norway. Norway was one of the first signatories to the UN Principles of Responsible Investing. Every company in Norway, be they public or private, is scored on HMS, which is really ESG. And we have our own internal ESG policies. For those that don't know, environmental social governance criteria are a set of standards for companies' operations for socially conscious investors to screen potential investments. So we're looking at environmental criteria, social criteria, and governance. Impact investing is made with companies, organization, and funds with the intention of a measurable, beneficial social or environmental impact. So our fund is totally focused on ESG and impact, as is the Norwegian government. Carl?
Yes. Well, Peter, if you want to introduce yourself briefly. Go background.
Okay, well, My career has been basically 45 years in sustainability. I was a policymaker in the Department of Energy, helping get the lead out of gasoline with EPA. I worked in the mayor's energy office in New York City on first energy efficiency programs in the 1980s. I worked with the Prius development team with Toyota. I've been instrumental in transferring knowledge on fuel reformulation to Asia in 1990 and changed laws in 4 countries on lead phase down in Asia. I was a partner in a clean tech fund. I'm currently a judge in the Clean Tech Open for the Northeast and an entrepreneur in residence for Columbia University Tech Ventures, where I mentor young companies. I'm a best-selling author, thought leader, and I run something called the Wall Street Green Summit, which is the oldest sustainable finance event in North America. Carl?
Yeah, my name is Carl Anderson. I have a background in finance and technology. For the last 5 years, I've been a strategic advisor to Nordic companies doing anything from tech advisory, business development, PR, and marketing, and cap raising and structuring. I sit on the executive board of the Norwegian American Chamber of Commerce, which is part of what we call Team Norway. Team Norway includes the Royal Embassy, the Consulate General, Innovation Norway, and we're actually a body that helps connect Norway to the United States through policy. I am a judge on the ERA Roundtable, which is a Nordic incubator here in the United States. I've been a consultant to Innovation Norway, helping them strategically with their public relations, establishing a relationship to Bloomberg and Financial City. I am an entrepreneur by background. I've started a reinsurance company, insurance-linked securities company, and been a partner at a broker-dealer. I've raised about $500 million for those deals, and I'm a graduate from Copenhagen Business School and speak Norwegian and Danish. Next slide here. And then I'll just talk about some of our other team members. Bill Pollan, I'll be brief. Bill Pollan had worked with the Finnish government for about 30 years. He got an honorary PhD from their government. He had been sitting on the boards of about 42 companies, 9 institutions, and he basically helped scale growth equity companies from Finland into the United States. In 2017, he won the US Department of Commerce Award for having done so. So he's an execution professional. He's an engineer by background, PhD from the University of Washington, had done most of his work in engineering for Boeing. So he's very familiar with material science, aeronautics, and the like. Jarl Ulven, he is also a part of our team. He had managed Uden Funds, which is a $10 billion fund out of the Nordics. He had a pretty long track record there. Once he left there, he had been in corporate finance at SEB. And he strategically had worked with, and I'll talk about them later, Investinor, which is a part of the government who co-invests with us, but he was one of their strategic advisors bringing companies into America, and that's how we initially met. Next slide. So, I apologize. The slides keep jumping around on us. Okay, so why now? Why AVG? Basically, what's going on since COVID-19 hit? If you're familiar with the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Norway, it's the first time that they've made a liquidation in response to an event. So they deployed about $37 billion back into the domestic economy of Norway to support and sponsor and grow renewable energy-based companies and infrastructure companies. The pricing is obviously very attractive. It's it's COVID-19, so we have opportunistic valuations. 9 times out of 10, the companies that we invest in, they're all B2B type companies. Component type companies. So we take those companies and then we take those and we scale them out. Hold on one second. The slides. Peter?
Yeah, it has to go back.
I know.
All right. Yeah, okay. We have quality deal flow. We are not investing in startups. So these companies are revenue generating. Our investable universe is 50 to 60 companies. But however, Norway is a very small country, 5 million people. So really, we're looking at opportunities to take these companies to Asia or the United States, much larger markets where they can scale and grow and be acquired. Also, as I mentioned before on ESG and impact, where ABG is a signatory to the UNPRI, but we're also very involved in the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. Specifically, we're involved in 5 of those Sustainable Development Goals: clean energy, clean water, sustainable agriculture such as aquaponics, fish farming, climate action, and that's it. Carl, next slide. You can move it.
Yeah. Yeah, next slide, please.
Oh, you're not controlling the slides. Okay.
I'm going to have just her control it because I think that was one of the issues. Okay, so this is a key, this is probably one of the more important slides to focus on. So basically what has happened then is that Norway has put $37 billion back into the domestic market to help grow all sorts of climate infrastructure and renewable energy type companies. And these are our government partners. So as mentioned before, Innovation Norway is a state-owned company and sort of a development bank. They issue forgivable loans and grants to the underlying companies. Investinor is a co-equity investor in the companies, but since COVID-19 hit, now they're co-LPs into our fund. So they've changed their mandate to co-invest directly into our fund. New Snow was formed in 2018 as the first climate sovereign wealth fund, and they invest directly into anything having to do with renewable energy projects and anything having to do with climate infrastructure and climate-related technologies, connected grid, smart city, these types of technologies. And Norfund, you may have heard of. DFIs are on the line. They will definitely have heard of it. It's a private equity fund established by the Norwegian Parliament, and they invest into renewable energy projects. So as a collection, all of these are partners of ours. We have worked with them endlessly on various types of projects. We will talk about that in a couple of the deals that we executed on. But Innovation Norway, the leader, Anita Transeth, the former leader, was a very good friend of mine personally, and we helped grow their thesis out and start scaling it out into a global platform. Investinor also, if you recall, Jarl Ulven was their key advisor in North America. So we're very close, very intimate to the government. And the government, it's really for Norway, the money is really not the issue. It's really looking for LPs, strategic LPs, especially in areas like Southeast Asia, where there's markets, where we can scale these companies and there's identifiable markets to scale. And I'll talk about a company where we did that, made that connection. Next slide. This is a quick slide, but basically, if you take the audited returns from both Investinor and Norfund, this is the cumulative returns that you would get, the cumulative ROI. So basically, if ABG was lazy and didn't do anything and just co-invested with the government, they do pretty well. But that's obviously not the case. We think we add a lot of value, but that's just to demonstrate, sort of a historical context. Next slide. Peter, do you want to start?
Yes. Okay. So basically, the fund has 2 parts. One is climate infrastructure. Norway runs on over 99% renewable energy, hydropower, through a company called Statkraft. So we're looking at solar, wind, hydropower, biomass, that's waste to energy, and we're looking at both large scale and small scale solar and wind. Just for your information, Equinor, the oil and gas company of Norway, is deploying $50 billion in offshore wind. Here in New York, they're building offshore wind in Taiwan. We would not be deploying that. We would be adding components to that. But we're very involved in project finance for renewables. Similarly, on infrastructure, building infrastructure, many buildings are not new construction. So we would be involved in the retrofit market, making buildings more energy efficient or greener. Green data centers are something we are very expert at. This is something in Norway where they can be running on the clean hydropower of Statkraft, and they're hyperscale. The Googles, the Netflix, the Amazons need that kind of server farm capability, and we would be investing as an equity partner in those kind of deals. Connectivity to the grid, industrial IoT, obviously batteries, electric vehicles. When I was in Oslo, I was astounded at the number of EV charging stations, and by 2025, all of Norway's cars will be electrified. So there's a lot of push in a small market. We think there's an opportunity to move that farther in larger markets with the technology. Carl?
Yeah, and you know, again, we see these two areas where traditionally some people separate these two as project finance as separate from a growth equity strategy. Actually, climate solutions as a trend is becoming more in vogue because there's a lot of overlap between the technology components and the IP that's developed from the companies, and then the project infrastructure that deploys them. And as Peter mentioned, green data centers are a big deal in Norway. Cheap cost of electricity, all hydroelectric, green and clean. And in COVID-19 terms, you know, it's very attractive because the amount of data that needs to be stored has gone up quite significantly. So we look at technology, energy efficiency technologies, industrial IoT. We work with smart label companies. Another sector which is specific to Norway. Maybe you've heard of Norwegian salmon, but the maritime tech and the ocean, what we call ocean space in Norway, is a massive industry. So anything having to do with shipping tech, hydrogen filling stations, shipping like paints, materials for the boats, things like that are all within the wheelhouse. Next slide. Peter, maybe you want to discuss this one?
Yeah, so basically, investors are probably familiar with investment in public companies. So most of the ESG market today are public companies. BlackRock, Trillium, Pax, Impact Asset Management invest in public companies. And there are many analytical services such as MSCI, Sustainalytics, RepRisk that do analytical analysis of public companies. So that's kind of a top-down approach. On the other side, where we sit, we're looking at the private markets. This is a much heavier lift, but it's 90% of the global market is in private companies, and there are fewer funds in this area. So BlackRock launched a renewable fund earlier this year, and we look here at Ares, Nephila, and others, but this is using ESG metrics in the need for methodology. And as I mentioned before, all companies in Norway are scored, on HMS. So we're looking at bottom-up approach where you're looking at very few, if any, analytical services for private companies. We have our own internal metrics. We're using Norwegian government and metrics from Investinor and others. So we are really very diligent about something that most companies can't be scored in the private sector these days. Carl?
Sure. Next slide. Next slide. Thanks. So these are a couple of deals. I'll be brief because I know we're short on time, but I wanted to bring the first two up because I think they're relevant for Asia. Tag Sensors was a deal we did, for example, that was about $4.5 million of investment. We got matched funding from the Norwegian government. We increased their value from about 5 million to 35 million. One of the key things that we did for them was supply them with IP insurance. One thing that they didn't understand was that, based upon cold chain solutions that are RFID applications, there was other patent trolls that were out there that were, trying to find infringement issues. And so we were able to, buy some insurance and protect them there. Same with Reforce Tech was a smart cement company. And what we had done with them was we raised about $2.5 million for them. We increased their value from 10 to 42.5 million. And our strategic value, again, is we have a network of exit partners. One of those in Reforce Tech's case was Owens Corning. Owens Corning is a Fortune 500 company. It's one of the best composite material companies in the world. They were looking at the basalt fiber that these guys had created to displace the need for rebar in cement structures. And it's a very likely acquisition target. So we can actually take a company like that, inject capital, and then find a short path for them to exit out of the Nordics. So that's some of our strategic value. Next slide. Next slide. Oh, there we go. These are some of the climate infrastructure deals we have done as well. Ula Vidar, who's part of our team, experienced engineer, 20 years of background in these are his deals that he had done specifically. So, climate infrastructure planning, he's familiar with onshore, offshore wind, hydroelectricity build-outs, waste to energy treatment, and the like. So these are just a couple of examples. And Peter, I don't know if you want to talk about the connection, what we do with the infrastructure and bring it.
These type of deals really are something the green bond market fits very well. For example, if you're looking at a wind farm, you're talking about a 25-year power purchase agreement. That's an agreement with a utility to buy the power. That fits with a securitization for a green bond. For the Financial Times last December noted that the first $1 trillion in green bonds had been securitized. It is a very hot market today. Also, we're looking at opportunities for pension funds because a 25-year strip in terms of activity on a waste to energy plant or a solar farm or a wind farm makes a lot of economic sense because it distributes cash on cash after the facilities are paid off. Carl?
Yeah, next slide, please. And just to touch on this really briefly, where our strategic value is taking these companies out of Norway, out of the Nordics. These are revenue generating companies already, so they're not in early venture kind of R&D seed type deals. We're looking at companies with revenue that have a strategic goal and a strategic location that they want to grow. We will sit on those boards. We will develop their shareholder agreements. We'll develop their 100-day business plan, 2-year business plan. We'll sit on as boards of directors along with the government, and then we will target their exit. As soon as we bring them into places like the United States or Singapore or China or Japan, that's really when they sort of can take on new capital and grow. Next slide, please. And again, this is just explaining that we usually look again at the last stage first. So we have strategic relationships, which Peter will mention in the next slide. But we organize the company with that in mind. So if it's like, for example, again, the Reforce Tech deal, when we're looking at Owens Corning, we're thinking, okay, what are they looking to acquire, and what do we have in our line of portfolio in terms of IP, and how do we move it there? And so strategically, we break that down into steps. and we secure, our shareholder rights or convertible notes, whatever it is, put liens and, the like on it. And then we bring those to a strategic exit. So we look for partners. We've worked in Singapore before, so that's kind of nice. We really like Singapore. And Thailand, we actually, Reforce Tech, I forgot to mention, we actually has helped establish them with a distribution center in Thailand. Okay, next slide.
So we have strong exit partners. Today, what we're looking at in terms of a value proposition is that smaller Norwegian companies that are creating this clean technology need to move faster and commercialize. Large strategic companies such as a Shell, a Schneider Electric, a GE, a Mitsubishi, a Siemens, a Marubeni are not creating that technology, they're buying that technology. So that's something that's occurring all over the world in terms of acquisition of young companies. Similarly, I've run a venture capital fund in clean tech. This would be appropriate for later stage venture capital, a BCD round. And we have relationships with the big banks in New York and London, the Goldman Sachs, the JP Morgans, the Morgan Stanleys. They have very active practices on M&A. So there's kind of twofold. Some of the companies will be acquired strategically from the big brands that I just mentioned. Some will be M&A, and some of them will be securitized deals. Carl?
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Next slide. Okay. So I'll be really brief because we're getting to the end here. So we obviously secured the rights for the investors. From the shareholder rights all the way down to finding, especially for the projects. I have a background in reinsurance, so hedging project liabilities with a Munich Re, Allianz, and the like really reduces the risk both for equity shareholders and debt shareholders who we work with and partner with. Next slide. Okay, so here's what I want to leave you with, just so you kind of get a better gist of the summary. What we're really focused on is climate solutions. The Norwegian government is looking for LPs globally. They identified AVG and the team as trusted partners to deliver on that mandate. We deliver a strategic value in taking those companies and bringing them outside of Norway. Norway is one of the biggest energy countries in the world. It has a lot of IP stemming from the renewable energy and energy markets. And so we would love to work with LPs and the AVPN network to help deliver on that and find the right partners and investors to go forward. We have approximately $40 million in soft commitments. Actually, one of those became more of a hard commitment just today. We have a feeder fund in Luxembourg, so we're working with a variety of family offices in Luxembourg, Mexico, and also Japanese institutions. So we actually worked with AVPN. We hosted their first ESG and Impact Summit, I think some time ago with Nina. So we love AVPN, and they're a great group of folks. They're doing a great job. So I guess I'll leave it with that. Score some brownie points with Kamal.
Absolutely, you get all the brownie points necessary. Thank you so much, Peter and Carl. With such a large and innovative fund, there are clearly numerous learnings that can be applied to the Asian market. We're going to delve further into that in the Q&A section. This is my opportunity to introduce AWR Lloyd. Next, we'll be hearing from them about their SDG Plus Fund. Please join me in welcome Brad Denning, the Managing Director of Innovation and Sustainability at AWR Lloyd, and Noor Febriani, the Executive Director at ASRI. Brad and Febri, the mic is yours.
All right, thank you so much, Kamal. I appreciate the introduction. So this morning, I'll present the SDG Plus Indonesia Fund, which is an innovative partnership and fund structure to address the sustainable development goals and specifically address deforestation, conservation, and climate impact. The next slide, please. Yeah. So as many are aware, there's a substantial financing gap to achieve the SDGs. According to UN Global Compact, at roughly 2.5 trillion USD per year. There's several impediments, right, that restrict the flow of capital to solutions in organizations that are capable of contributing to the SDGs. But we focus on what we perceive as two of the most critical. First is that non-financial returns, meaning the human, social, environmental benefits of activities and projects, are rarely quantified and fully considered in financing decisions. As a result, these benefits that these organizations are generating that contribute towards the Sustainable Development Goals are not valued. And this has a limiting effect on the amount of capital that goes towards projects and organizations seeking to address the SDGs. Second, and this is specific to NGOs and social enterprise organizations, often with decades of meaningful experience that's very much needed right now to address the SDGs, they spend a considerable amount of time and resources seeking grant funding. And likewise, this limits the ability of these organizations to focus on creating maximum impact with their expertise. So we think there are three critical solutions to address these two impediments. First is greater integration in quantification of non-financial returns. In our context for this morning, we're going to refer to that as SDG outcomes. Second is that structures must be developed with scale in mind. So if we consider the urgency of addressing these goals and issues, it's important that scale is designed in. And then lastly, the structure should generate reliable sources of funding for SDG-oriented organizations and project developers in exchange for generating and then reporting SDG outcomes back to investors. In response to these challenges, we developed the SDG Plus Indonesia Fund, and there's a few key concepts and projected impacts. So first, the financial returns are from a blended ESG portfolio, and those returns will be shared between investors and a beneficiary organization. The beneficiary shares in the annual cash yield of the portfolio, but not in the overall gains of the fund. Second is non-financial returns that are generated when the beneficiary uses those funds to invest in projects. Those impacts are quantified as SDG outcomes and reported back to investors as part of their overall returns. And then third, we've constructed the fund in order to scale so that future funds will address a different set of SDGs with new beneficiaries addressing those specific set of SDG goals. So that brings us to our next slide, which is the specifics of this fund. So in the spirit of the SDGs, we focus on partnership. And so A.W. Lloyd Asset Management and PT Bahana TCW are collaborating as fund and impact managers. Bahana is the third largest fund manager in Indonesia, approximately 3 billion USD under management, and has extensive experience with impact-focused endowment funds. In regards to the beneficiary for this fund, we are working with Alam Sehat Lestari, or ASRI, which has been active in Indonesia for over a decade, focused on conservation and sustainable development through education and healthcare-focused outcomes in local communities. The targeted SDGs of ASRI's activities are 3, good health and well-being, 13, climate action, and 15, life on land. However, there are multiple positive outcomes across a wider spectrum of SDGs that we've noted there on the bottom right of the slide. Next slide is, this is an overview of the various partners that we've assembled in the fund and the specific roles. Again, as mentioned, Bahana has 20 years of experience leading fixed income and endowment manager in Indonesia, and their role is fund strategy and management. A.W. Lloyd acts as the impact manager. We have 20 years experience largely in strategy consulting, investor communications relations, and transactions advisory in the Indo-Pacific region, and will be responsible for ESG integration and investor communication strategy, as well as quantification of SDG outcomes from ASRI's activities. Third, so ASRI is the beneficiary in this fund structure and will receive a portion of the annual cash yield in order to make additional project investments. They'll collaborate with AWR Lloyd, as well as Health in Harmony, which is a sister organization to ASRI, to quantify that impact. And then lastly, we're very proud to have the global support of the Private Finance Advisory Network, or PFAN, in the development of this fund. To give you a sense of the allocation of the fund, it's split between public equities and bonds. The public equities are an ESG screened and overweight to Asia Pacific companies, whereas the sustainable bond portion is geared specifically to Indonesia. And again, that's to leverage the experience and expertise of Bahana. A requirement in structuring the fund in this way is to ensure that there's an annual cash yield that can be shared both between investors and ASRI. So a little bit more now about PT Bahana TCW. Is a joint venture between PT Bahana Pembinaan Usaha and the Trust Company of the West. So they're the top fixed income manager in the country, awarded Best Asset and Fund Manager for 5 consecutive years between 2015 and 2019. And the firm has seen pretty remarkable growth in assets under management, 26% consolidated annual growth rate from going back to 2005. A little more on Bahana is that not only are they leading asset manager in the country, but they've been a pioneer in sustainable investing, certainly in the region. They launched the first green fund in Indonesia in 2007, Kahati Lestari. And that same award was just recently awarded the Best Impact Fund of Indonesia in 2019 last year. As well, our colleagues at Bahana are the largest endowment manager in the country and currently manage 6 fixed income endowment funds with a sustainable development component for Indonesia. These funds have tended to focus on education, supporting research and social programs at the nation's universities, as well as funds supporting conservation, affordable healthcare, and community development and economic empowerment. In IDR denominated terms, the funds have achieved annual returns between 8 and 11%. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to Bu Noor Febriani, or Febri, the Executive Director of ASRI. And ASRI is the social enterprise and designated beneficiary of the fund.
Right, thank you, Brett. Thank you, AWR Lloyd and AVPN. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm Febri. I've been working in development work for about 15 years and already 2.5 years with ASRI. I'd like to introduce ASRI. It's a unique organization integrating forest conservation and healthcare project. Dr. Canary Webb first founded ASRI in 2007 along with Indonesian dentist Hotlin Ompusunggu. And she also found our sister organization, Health in Harmony, 2 years before, based in Portland, Oregon. ASRI has over 100 staffs. We have doctors, midwives, nurses, conservationists, and other skilled professionals who are all Indonesians. ASRI is led by women, and its emphasis on women has been a key driver to our impact. And we are so grateful to be supported by amazing donors from all over the world. Our main project site is in Gunung Palung National Park in West Borneo. It is 108,000 hectares of rainforest with stunning biodiversity that is home to a key population of Bornean orangutans and other endangered species. There we serve around 120,000 people. So these are our programs. On healthcare, we provide high quality, affordable healthcare at ASRI Medical Center and also mobile health clinic to reach more remote villages. We have an incentive system so that people from villages where there is little or no logging can receive a discount to their healthcare, and people can pay with non-cash. So we provide several options on payment like seedlings, handicrafts, labor. The most popular one in our non-cash payment is seedlings. Last year, we received more than 23,000 seedlings. And these seedlings, then we use in our reforestation project. In conservation, we have representatives from community working with us as forest guardians, doing deforestation monitoring. We also, in reforestation project, we've planted more than 220,000 seedlings over 160 hectares of degraded forest. In livelihoods, we provide sustainable agriculture training. We support loggers to have alternative livelihood by offering a program, we call it chainsaw buyback program. So basically we buy back their chainsaw and replace it with support for new small businesses like groceries or farming. And we also help poor widows, the most vulnerable community, the most vulnerable in the community, to raise goats. And in education, we educate the next generation about the importance of protecting the rainforest. Now I want to share you the remarkable impact we've seen. The best is that our planetary health approach is working. So scientists at Stanford University analyzed the result from our 10-year survey and found that with $5.2 million in program cost from 2007 to 2017, we were able to sequester the equivalent of around $65 million in carbon. We saw a 90% drop in illegal logging households. 21,000 hectares of secondary forestry grew. Habitat for 3,000 orangutan was protected. And on healthcare, we saw 67% drop in infant mortality. We received more than 90,000 visits from over 33,000 individuals. And more than 1,000 loggers switched their livelihood. In our chainsaw buyback program, we saw around 62% small businesses are still running well. So key to our model is what we call radical listening. We believe that the rainforest communities are the expert and they know the solution. So before beginning our program in Gunung Palung, we did many hours of radical listening with the community. We asked them, what do you need in order to stop logging and live in harmony with the rainforest? So what we heard was that the community that time needed high quality, affordable healthcare, alternative livelihood training. Basically, they said, if there was any stable work than being loggers, then we would do it. So that's what ASRI did. We provide healthcare, discounts for healthcare, non-cash payment, and chainsaw buyback program to support loggers in having alternative businesses and many other programs. Seeing the successes, in 2018, we opened our new site near Bukit Baka, Bukit Raya National Park, also in Borneo. It is a 181,000 hectares park that is critical for orangutan translocation and reintroduction. The village there are home to about 2,000 indigenous people that face many of the same challenges as the people around Gunung Palung. We have ambitions to expand our model across all Indonesia. With appropriate funding, we would be able to carry out our 10-year strategic plan, which would expand to at least 2 additional sites, increase reforestation, expand current program to more communities and individuals, working with Indonesian government, scaling up the model throughout Indonesia, and strengthen our monitoring and evaluation system. So that's all from me. If there's any question, please. Thank you. Brett.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Brad and Fabri. It's inspiring to see how you've institutionalized impact in the SDG Plus Fund to support organizations making such a meaningful impact as ASRI. For those of you who joined a bit late and didn't get a chance to fill out the polls, we're relaunching it now. Please submit your answers. If you've already submitted your answers, please feel free to close the poll. We'll give it another 30 seconds. And please scroll down because there's a number of questions. So it would be useful for us to have this information and be able to pass it on to the two funds speaking today. Thank you. Jenny, if we could close the poll. We've received quite a few questions during the presentations, and I'd like to invite the speakers to turn on their cameras for the Q&A section of the webinar. Our first question will be for Peter and Carl. How does the Nordic ESG and Impact Fund tie into Asia? Are there opportunities to bring and grow your portfolio companies in APAC, including growing their impact in Asia? So this one's for you, Peter.
Yes, there's quite a few opportunities. The reason is the Asian market is much bigger than Norway, and we're taking companies that already have proven technology in a very small market of 5 million people and scaling and commercializing that in the Asian market. So we think there's, frankly, quite a few opportunities in many different countries in Asia. So the answer is yes, and we have, on top of that, support of the Norwegian government to help us along to inject capital into these companies as well.
There's another question we've got for the AV group, and what kind of wind and solar projects will the fund invest into, and how would these Norwegian renewable companies succeed in Asia? Perhaps if we could have Carl answer this one.
Yeah, sure. I mean, most of what we're looking at are deals, you know, the utility scale solar and wind deals don't yield as much as our target profile. So what we're actually looking at is sort of alternative climate solution type deals. For example, waste to energy, anaerobic digestion. If it's solar, maybe we're looking more at distributed solar type deals. So that's what we're targeting. In Asia and specifically Singapore, I was actually down in Singapore at the last AVPN conference, and we were looking at how we could apply floating solar techniques into off of Singapore. And I was working with the Norwegian ambassador to Singapore, Thomas Seck, and a few others on thinking about how we do that. So there's a lot of new innovation that's happening in Southeast Asia, and I think a lot of different types of applications that can be applied, not just wind and solar, but anaerobic digestion, waste to energy, waste to value type systems, and that's really where the yields are too. And the way we also look at that is through the lens of making sure we have insurance to protect against those. So we bring in lenders, we'll bring in the Norwegian government as support when we do those deals.
Can you give an example of any previous investment made that's considered by the Nordic ESG and Impact Fund and elaborate on its impact, especially in Asia?
Oh yeah, sure. Reforce Tech is a great example of that. Basically what the technology was a basalt fiber nanotechnology that it looks like pipe cleaners, and you mix it into the cement itself, and it gets rid of the need for steel rebar. So what it does is actually shrinks the amount of cement you actually need. And it was reducing the carbon footprint by about 50%. So that was a direct impact. And Owens Corning was our biggest distributor in North America, but we were looking strategically. We had a relationship in Thailand to distribute that technology. And they actually had done several deals on building slabs and the like. But China, obviously, if you look at the amount of cement consumption, it's like the rest of the world, China. So obviously that's a target market for us to be impactful. So it's a decarbonization type of play.
Brad, you had some additional points you wanted to make about the role of PT Vahana. Would you be able to speak a little bit more about how PT Vahana plays a role and how you identified a social enterprise like ASRI, and also what's been the experience with these the endowments that PT Vahana has worked with in the past?
Sure, and as well, would like to introduce that we have a colleague from PT Vahana on the line. Kevin, I believe, is on the line, and if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yes, I'm on the line.
So sure, maybe, Kevin, if you wouldn't mind handling the one part of the question in terms of lessons learned from previous endowment experience of Vahana, that would be great.
Yes, okay, thank you for the question. My name is Kevin from Vahana TCW as a manager in digital business currently. Well, Vahana was the pioneer in implementing social responsible investment since 2007. And when we launched our first green fund in Indonesia, Kehati Lestari, it was in 2007. And now in 2018, we reemphasize our commitment toward social responsible investment by issuing 6 endowment funds since. Over the years, there are many lessons we have learned. I think I would like to share 2 short learning. First, we think that the fund must be purposeful. Each of our endowment fund have a specific focus of beneficiary, predominantly to promote national healthcare, sharing economic development, and also education. For example, one of our long-standing endowment fund called Makara Prima as well, it provides scholarships and funds programs to the University of Indonesia. But we are also we are also being supported by the alumni of the University of Indonesia to do the program. And the second, we think that the investment strategy must be clear. Most of our endowment fund are conservative in nature with low to moderate risk return profile. And the composition of our endowment fund are typically heavy on fixed income securities to obtain stable and optimal growth to fund the program of the beneficiary. I think that's are the 2 main learning lessons that we can learn from our past experience.
And if I may add one thing to that, one lesson that I think that we've learned in terms of developing the structure is to make the yield apportionment to the beneficiary social enterprise, to make that mandatory. I think there are other examples in the market of funds that are trying to do something similar, but they are an option in terms of the management fee from the fund manager, and or the investor can select one of multiple different tranches in terms of how much of that annual yield to go to a beneficiary. But if it's optional, you remove that reliability of the funding for the organization. And then the last thing I'd say is that in terms of identifying an organization, clearly we want to work with organizations where they have a clear focus on a set of SDGs, but through their projects and practices, there's a multiplicity of positive outcomes that aren't currently being quantified. If we can quantify those and show just the breadth of positive outcomes you get from working with a social enterprise, we think that SDG outcome information will be very valuable to investors.
Brad, this is quite a unique model that you've adopted. How did you isolate the SE that you wanted to support? And could you share a little bit more about the ASRI model? And also, how do you quantify, how does that return on investment provide disbursement for seedlings, et cetera, to the communities that ASRI is involved with?
Well, I think, I would ask February to speak about the actual activities of ASRI. For ourselves, in terms of, the quantification component of the question, and what is our approach to doing that, I'd have to say that the honest answer there is that that's evolving, right, in terms of what is the methodology to quantify those impacts. Going back a few years, we used a lot of the information from GRI and the UN Global Compact on business reporting to the SDGs. And so there, right, you're looking at every goal and then the 170 targets or so, and looking at the metrics for each one of those targets, and then getting baseline information, change in baseline information, and then communicating that as a contribution to an SDG. So that said, in the last maybe 6 months or so, there's a lot of developments in UNPRI and others around actually quantifying things as SDG outcomes. So we think there will be more clarity forthcoming on a standardized way to quantify outcome. But perhaps, February, you can address the other part of the question, please.
Yeah. So for ASRI, like we did, we already done the, where the healthcare we provided community can access payment with seedlings. So we record how many seedlings contributed by the patients. We also recorded how many seedlings contributed by the other workers. So not only the numbers of seedlings, but also we list the type of seedlings. So the types of seedlings that will strengthen the biodiversity and the livelihood that is as the outcome from the reforestation project. The livelihood is also being supported where people have more work because it's a labor intensive, and people can contribute with growing seedlings and making, in the future, we would also have people to support with biodegradable polybags. So this thing, we see it as the good model where we fight the climate crisis, but also support livelihood and biodiversity. And we try our best to record the process, so we know how many seedlings and how many types of the seedlings.
You know, we are really running out of time. That was the last question we could take. If I could give everybody, in the panel an opportunity to leave the audience with some key takeaway, can we start with you, Peter? And then we'll move on to the other panelists as well.
Yes, I think the lessons learned from COVID is that human health and welfare comes first. And now is the time to invest in sustainability.
Entirely agree. Carl?
Yeah, and I think focusing on, staying laser focused on things like climate solutions where you can really make an impact and have that support from, governments and policymakers is really useful and as a catalyst to investing. So we're excited to be working with new LPs, and we again thank AVPN for hosting. So,
Kevin, if we could turn to you. Fabri?
Okay. From us, that we know human health and nature's health is really connected. So we need to work on both. And we really look forward for a better partnership. Thank you.
Brad, yourself?
Yeah, just that in order to address the SDGs and climate impact, we think one of the critical components here is to institutionalize impact valuation, right? A lot of the positive outcomes of organizations like ASRI and other project developers, they're not fully evaluated and quantified. And so a key component is to get institutional finance to really recognize that value and create new structures that make room for that.
Do we still have the gentleman from PT Bahana on as well?
Yes, I think that this project is really purposeful and really get start the project, and we hope it's everything is all right. I think that's from us.
Thank you, everyone. That's all we have time for. Thank you to all the participants who've joined from various time zones. We've had about 150 people on all the time. So that's really wonderful that we have such keen interest in the subject matter as well. I hope you enjoyed listening to all our speakers, and please join me in thanking them for an incredibly engaging discussion. We'll be posting a recording of this webinar in the next few days, and please check back on our website for access. If you enjoyed this webinar, we're also going to be having our next webinar, Investing in Technology to Enhance Impact in a Post-COVID World, on the 8th of September with Teja Ventures and Open Space. The link to it is in the chat. And today we have a separate session at 12 o'clock SUT, which is a DealShare live session. It's going to have 4 social entrepreneurs from Korea showcasing their innovative tech-based solutions that are tackling specific challenges that arise through urbanization. If you can, some of you are in different time zones, but if you can afford to stay up late, please do join this one as well. You can find the link in the chat. Please also check out our AVPN's Climate Action Platform for more climate solutions. Again, the link is in the chat. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope to see you online soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.